first quarter crime stats, the police minister has raised grave concerns over the alarming rise in violent crimes. To help us unpack these numbers, I'm now joined by Professor Jacob Mofokeng, a security analyst from the Tshwane University of Technology. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thanks very much for your time. I guess whether it's sobering, which is a word the minister used today, or horrific, as others have, before him have described previous crime statistics, we should be moving beyond words describing the crisis we are in, shouldn't we?
Good afternoon, Prof and Newzroom viewers. Indeed, we, at this time of democratic dispensation, the narratives are supposed to have changed, but it looks like we are stuck, with the issue of violent crime, as well as, that overwhelming, feeling that it seems like the criminals are taking an upper hand, in our societies, and the lack of, adequate response by law enforcement agencies, the lack of crime intelligence to be able to inform the activities of the South African police services, and the lack of our communities, to have that kind of confidence as well as trust to be able to cooperate with the South African Police Service. Despite the NDP 2030 assuring us that, 7 years from now or 6 years from now, we will be able to attain a level of security where people will move freely, including women, in our streets without, fear. But it looks like, that remains a pipe dream to South Africa. And we see now the emergence of criminal networks as well as, extortions of businesses, not only businesses, but ordinary, people in South Africa. Then that shows that really South Africa remains under siege, after 3 decades into a democratic dispensation.
We are indeed under siege, and some situations are actually a cause for concern. I don't know if you saw this. Last week, you had the MEC responsible for policing in Mpumalanga. They were about to launch an operation with Zama-Zamas, and then they decided to halt the operation. And it's not only an illegal activity that was happening underground. The Zama-Zamas had actually moved to the town and took over homes that belong to public works, that belong to the state. They booted people out of there. And the operation was aborted because the police didn't feel confident enough to be able to confront those criminals. And the situation was left there just like that.
Yes, it really paints a very bleak picture that our law enforcement agencies, then they found to be lacking, as you indicated, a confidence to be able to go and confront this particular group of people that are terrorizing communities. You also see that kind of phenomenon in, in terms of criminal networks in KwaZulu-Natal, where, these people will go and take over so-called safe houses, for communities where, they will sleep over, or maybe could, try to, to be under the radar for the law enforcement agencies not to be able to trace them. But before they will leave, then they will have to rob the owners of those houses, and, they could do whatever that they intended to do. So it shows that, the tenacity of criminal networks in terms of how forceful and how aggressive then they have become, despite, the splitting of communities' views in terms of whether the police are using an upper hand, in terms of, especially in the area of KwaZulu-Natal, where, people will be killed, criminals, in exchange of firearms. So it points to a situation where, the common denominator will be, proliferation of firearms, despite the call by Gun Free South Africa to say that, the control, the Firearm Control Act that was launched around 2000 is no longer fit for purpose, because you see gun owners having a lot of, leeway in terms of acquiring a lot of firearms, but also the obsession by the South Africans, those who are having licenses to have multiple, kinds of firearms as well as ammunition. So it just shows that maybe people are becoming, afraid, or they think that the use of firearms will be a safest way to be able to control their assets.
I mean, I was listening to the police yesterday. We were talking about these extortionists, and the police saying part of the problem is that they have to act on information, in other words, people reporting these crimes. And on the other hand, you have experts, of course, telling you that these people are not going to report these crimes for a whole variety of reasons. They won't report the crimes because once they report, then the criminals will know who it was who reported them, and they would have to go and testify in court, and that could be, the end of them. But of course, there are other reasons why people, some of them are here illegally, and they're targeted by criminal syndicates, so it becomes difficult for them as well to go and report these crimes. Then the situation becomes hopeless, and now extortion is something we've been talking about, especially over the past few weeks.
Yes, it has been even, I think it's for years that we've been talking about the issue of extortions. I remember it then, years back, it was about police officials who are targeting, undocumented foreign nationals, so that they can be able to pay that kind of protection fee. But then it is a loophole that criminal networks then observed, and now they are taking over in terms of, terrorizing business sectors, including normal, families, whereby, we are talking about even in locations, in suburbs, in any sector, whereby they realize that, it is a quick way of, making money, as well as the inadequacy of the South African Police Service to be able to deal with this particular threat. But we see also the reaction by the South African Police Service to be able to mobilize, a certain number of officers in hotspots, areas, of which this kind of, strategy is not sustainable, because we've got the so-called displacement of crime, that whenever we broadcast that, okay, a certain number of, police officials will be able to police a particular area, they move to a particular, policing area. It's something that, is emerging, that we cannot be able to effectively, decisively deal with, these criminal networks. You see where firearms owners are able to, sell the, certain stacks of firearms to people in the Western Cape, of which, the crime statistics also indicated that it is one of the areas that is bleeding, including, KwaZulu-Natal. So if we have pieces of legislations that are not really much operative and cannot be able to fully, assist in terms of elimination or reduction of a certain, phenomenon in the societies, then we will then therefore, experience challenges. It is for, as the minister indicated, that, he's here to support the police commissioner, but also we need to see, the political will in terms of coming forward. We have, an act such as POCA that is only part of it is implemented, to be able to deal with gangsterism and the use of firearms. We have now this particular firearm control, of which has now certain loopholes, of which, those that are observing and under within those particular domains are making use of that. So we need to be able to holistically look at this, so that in the future, any piece of legislation that is passed into law, it should be thoroughly interrogated, so that it cannot really open up unnecessary loopholes whereby criminal networks will be able to flourish and still instill fear. But also the question of, the crime statistics that we have today, they have to, to be in harmony with those that are published by, Statistics South Africa. Remember, a few days ago, they highlighted that, with the previous census, those stats that they provided were not really accurate because of certain sectors of communities did not participate, such as elderly people. So what we have now is just a glimpse of what could be, the real problem that is happening in our streets as well as in our homes.
Indeed, Prof. And you and I haven't even spoken, for example, about sexual offenses. 11,566 between April and June this year.
Horrible, horrible, horrible statistics. We are talking about human beings that were violated. And these are, if one compares, stats with, between murder as well as sexual, related offenses, often we make analysis that murder stats are more accurate as compared with sexual related offenses because, it takes a lot of courage for a victim to be able to, to go to the local community service center, we often refer to as a police station, to be able to report such because, we are talking about reformation of the criminal justice system where we've got, capacities within these stations whereby, victims are being isolated, where they will be able to provide with information without, other, community members listening to that. So it just shows that we have to bring the specialized units. We have to prioritize, resources where it is really hurting so that really, truly, we can be able to respond adequately to all the victims of crime, including, women and children that are being exploited.
Just to finish off this discussion, Prof, we saw earlier the President, Minister of Police, the Premier of the Western Cape, the Mayor, people from the Mayoral Committee in the city of Cape Town, Community Policing Fora, signing a cooperation agreement. I suppose every effort counts or matters, but do we have a history of those kinds of efforts, like really delivering the goods? They may be well meant in certain instances, but whether do we know if do we have a history of them actually delivering better than, say, in places where there are no such efforts?
We don't have a good history whereby there have been that kind of initiatives. Remember in the issue of Khayelitsha, how there were, commissions there and how the police communities, they would address the issues of, crime, criminality, victimization. But years later, Khayelitsha, Nyanga, as well as others, they still, leading in terms of, extortion, gender-based violence, the use of firearms, and around this particular collaborations where we received good stories about different stakeholders joining hands, signing memorandums of understanding. We are yet to see where good case studies where this partnership has truly yielded the required fruits. So it is yet to be to be seen whether indeed collaborations. These days we are talking about private-public, collaborations where also private sectors, they are bringing their financial muscles to be able to deal with these issues. But we don't have good case studies. What we see is the just increasing crime rate, as well as emergence of certain other types of crimes, as well as how South Africa is keep on going higher and higher in terms of global ranking with violent crime.
Prof, that's where we're going to leave it for this afternoon. Thank you.